I am so excited for yet another epic conversation on the Life at Full Blast podcast. And this conversation has been a long time coming. I don't know why we haven't scheduled it until now, but it's all about the timing. Jessica, so glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Cindy. Yeah, laughing. Like, why didn't we do this sooner? We weren't meant to, obviously. So
Right?
all in the
Exactly.
timing.
All about the timing. So, Jessica, you and I met through a different community, learning numerology. We are both numerology absolute geeks and we love the numbers. But you and I use the numbers a lot differently because you have a much different background than mine. So, I would love to know what brought you to where you are now and who are you? And let's just start from the beginning. Who is
Yeah,
Jessica?
I love this. First of all, I have to say, whenever I think, oh, I wonder about this, I'm like, let me ask Cindy. It's just so fun to bounce ideas off someone with a different chart, but also similarities. So, yeah, I started back off in the more traditional way we think about numbers, which is finance and business. And in fact, so I guess corporate that I wore pantyhose and 3-inch heels and I worked on Wall Street for a while. And I didn't know it at the time, probably to the extent I do now, but there was always something drawing me to the numbers. It was not just about the fact that you could make a lot of money, although we did. It was more about the fun of it. And during that time, it became very clear to me that the numbers were speaking to me in a way that I could not yet articulate to people around me. And therefore, I started to feel uncomfortable in that
Mhm.
environment. You
Mhm.
know, the fellow people around me, or even my professors back in school would be like, well, how do you know? Well, show
Yeah.
me. The worst thing anyone could say to me was
Show
like,
me the
show
work.
me the work. Oh my gosh. But the thing was, I actually did it. I spent years, now that I think back, I don't want to say wasting time, but it spent so much time reverse engineering my answers. And every time I did, I had this voice inside me be like, are you happy now? Like, we told
Yeah.
you this a couple hours ago. And
I don't know why
now,
you need to do all
right?
that.
And so, I decided to really take a left-hand turn and I took a break from Wall Street and I went to work on a cruise ship. And it's like, wow, that's a left-hand turn, yes. But on the cruise ship, if you can imagine, we were just with people from all around the world, both guests, crew, colleagues. And it was really there that I really um, started to hone in on what I love most, which was probably people, and not
Mhm.
just people, but the connections between people
Mhm.
from such different backgrounds. And yet, you could always find patterns and connections. And so when I came back to land, as they say, I do what most people do. And I went back to my comfort zone. I went back to corporate, I went back to finance, but I took on a little bit of a human resource lens. And it was through the human resource lens that I learned, got certified in, and facilitated like all the personality tests. Like
Yeah.
you name it, I did it. Myers-Briggs, True Colors, disc analysis, like, and all that time, what I really, you and I are similar in this. I have a really good bullshit meter. Like,
Yeah.
I know you do too, right? So imagine the difference between then and what I do now is the people that I was facilitating these courses for and these tests for, they answered the test themselves.
Yeah.
And you could always tell the people who would answer it being like, this is who I want to be, or this is who I think my
Yeah.
boss wants me to be. So the results, like I felt we never got to go deep enough because it's like,
hmm You're not getting accurate results.
exactly. And so when I came to learn numerology, that's when my worlds, I'm laughing, 111 p.m.
Of
Well,
course it
as we're
is.
recording this, of course it is, as I bring it back to numerology, this is where the worlds like really collided. And I was like, wow, this is bringing all the aspects I love about people and all the things that I'm good at in terms of like recognizing patterns and also intuitive energy work. And I
hmm
love that we could just dive through the bullshit so quickly and
Yeah.
get to what really is there, which at the end of the day is energy. So, I mean, there's so many, of course, so many different chapters
Yeah.
in that time frame, but really now that's what I do. Still using numbers every day, but obviously. not wearing the
Yeah.
power suits anymore, not not but it's funny. Money, of course, comes back into it. That's part of, what we can do with numerology. So I haven't totally left that side. But we just use numbers in such a
Yeah.
different way. Yeah.
I think what I love the most, I mean, there's so many aspects of your story that I love, especially how different of a background you and I have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But corporate, no thank you.
Yeah.
Try and stick a five of diamonds in a box or pantyhose. Um, but when you were talking about being in corporate and on Wall Street, you were talking about, yeah, you were working with money, but it was about the play. Money loves to play. So it makes sense that you would take that avenue instead of like the money, 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 money. It's like that playful, fun, creative energy versus the money.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
funny, it's in my chart, it's all about the present moment. And really, I truly believe that everything just works out. And so that's why
Mhm.
I could never understand a lot of the stress and the anxiety that was coming in that specific sector, because I was like, well, if it's red today, it's just going to be green tomorrow. Like if you're, it's get like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just going to work itself out. And
Yeah.
my clients would be like, do we really want you in charge of our portfolio? And I'm like, no, it'll be great. And it always was. But
Yeah.
I think it was that attitude that was just a bit different, but
Yeah.
that I really didn't want to change about myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're in an environment that wants you to change and you don't want to change, you have a choice. And I chose to
Mhm.
leave that environment. I'm so glad I did. But I laugh like a beautiful full moment a couple of months ago. I had an old colleague. Actually, we went to university together and we went to opposing trading houses. And he had come back into my life for a reading. And it was just so cool, right?
Yeah.
Like to have that full circle moment
Right?
with someone who knew me in both spaces, and that's
Mhm.
why he came to me.
Yeah.
And so we're always just coming back home to ourselves, right?
Isn't
So
that
just
the truth? Yes. I
just take
love
some
that.
time, take some,
Go on a
different
journey, go
turns.
on a
Yeah,
cruise. Gotta go on a cruise for a while and then
right.
yeah, I'll go on a cruise.
But it's
Oh
funny. Well,
my
you'll
God.
laugh because, of course, I spent 7 years on a cruise ship. That
Of course you did.
never,
Yeah.
never, ceases to amaze me of that time frame. But anyway,
Oh my gosh. I was literally just guesting on someone else's podcast and we were talking about the 7 year cycles. So this,
of
you can't
course,
make this shit up.
cannot.
So good. So tell us a little bit about, the work that you're doing now. So you've come this far. You're definitely numerology. You teach numerology,
Mhm.
but share a little bit about some of the other pieces of the work that you're doing with the numbers.
Yeah. So as you said, like I teach numerology. I teach it in a way that really allows people to use their own intuition with the numbers as mirrors.
Thank
And
you.
so, yeah, I never want to be the person who says, this means this, and it's because I said so, right? If we
Yeah.
look back at the history of numbers and how many different people and civilizations have studied them, they're meant to be interpreted differently because we are all different. So
Exactly.
I love that part of my work. And I was laughing, reflecting as we a lot of times do at the end of the year and into the next year, and I've graduated and certified over 500 students, which is just like,
Oh,
wow, it feels so good to have that out in the world in that way.
yeah.
But a lot of the other, it's so funny. As also, my chart, I also like a variety. And so I did quote unquote go back to corporate, but now I'm back in some corporate arenas as an energetic strategist.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know if the world is ready. Some of the companies that I work for are pretty mainstream, and I don't know if they're ready to say they have a numerologist, on their payroll. So
Right.
I'm an energy strategist.
It works. It works.
It
Yep.
works.
That's a
Um,
little out there, but
but what happens is as soon as they start to see results, of course, that's when it's more accepted.
yeah.
So I work a lot of times specifically with the marketing and social media sections of an organization because they're always wanting to connect with people. Of course, I work with the finance departments of those organizations. And, I've done just more recently a lot of work with leadership in the C suite. Because if you
Mm,
can imagine, that's where a lot of the conflict is about the direction of the company. And when we can really start to like be confident in our own abilities and also know when to surrender to control to perhaps someone else in the room, when we can really like dig into the strengths and the challenges that we all embrace, I think that group work has been really
mm,
amazing for me. And of course, all of this, although I'm not always so upfront and out there about it, underneath it, I use it in a variety of ways. I use it in terms of past lives. I do a lot of meditation and visualization with the numbers. I talk to my guides who lead me to these maybe more revelations or new concepts about the numbers. But what I'm always trying to do, and this is what I always love talking about you, is like, yeah, we go out there, but we don't
yeah,
stay there because how is that going to help anyone? So
it does.
really my mission is to like allow myself to go out there and
Mhm.
trust me. You and I have both know we go places sometimes with these meditations, visualizations. But then I just love like you can't see what Cindy just did, but she just like pulled from the sky. And that's what I feel it is, right? Like we pull back these nuggets and we don't need to tell why. This is a big thing that I've learned. I don't need to tell anybody why I know. I don't need to justify that I
You don't
heard
need
it
to
in
show
the
your work.
I don't need to show my work. Let me say it for people louder in the back. I can just say it and trust myself. And that's also what I love about that because we can all do it in so many different ways. And that's the point. But just really bringing the energy and numbers to people in a way that they can understand and they can embrace and they can use their intuition and many times, what comes through me, I don't understand. And I've learned
Mhm.
to realize that it's not up to me to understand what this means. I simply relay it and like detach from the outcome. And that's what I love. Like, so I just, this reminds me, I still like laugh about this story. I had been working with an individual and they had brought me into the C suite group to see like if this was something that I could work with in the organization. And so I shared some ideas and concepts and what I thought would happen in their business in a few months. And essentially, they kicked me out of the Zoom room so fast. They were like, "Thank you very much. You're a little bit cuckoo.
Crazy.
You're crazy." Like, but basically, it was like, you just, of course, I know people. They were just like, "Okay, we don't believe anything you're saying." Click. And
Yeah.
6 months later, I got a call, and they're like, "I can't believe we're saying this. Everything you said that happened came true. Can you come back and work with
Yeah.
us?" And I was like, but between now then and that like if I had really been attached to how they were feeling or if they would believe me, if I had even tried to justify my work in that moment, I don't think they would have come back to me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
simply said, "Amazing. Thank you so
Okay.
much for this
Goodbye.
opportunity. Okay, bye." And so when they came back, it was a surprise in the fact that I hadn't thought about them for a while. But it
Right.
wasn't really a surprise because it was like, well, duh.
Yeah. You just know.
I just know. Yeah.
I love it. I love that. And I think it's so important the work that you're doing of going into corporate because that is one of the places on this planet that could use some of this more than, I mean, we all need it, right? And we all need to understand who we are. But I think this is where the change starts to shift, starts to happen is in these corporate spaces, in these places where people are not aware of energy strategy. Call it that. And being able to like put yourself in rooms that might be scary for a lot of people to put yourself out there and maybe to be laughed at, maybe to be kicked out of the Zoom room, maybe to be told you're a witch and you're crazy. So kudos to you for doing this because I think this is creating world change.
Thank you. And I have to receive that because, you know, I know it does. We don't always get physical evidence, but
Mhm.
because of where I work, um, evidence is important. And so many times throughout my work, we do employee surveys, both on how
Mhm.
they're feeling. So satisfaction is also, because you know this, like energy, it's really important, not only what happens, the result, but sometimes even more important is how we feel about it, because that tells us if we're going to do it again or not.
Yeah.
And so we've done so many surveys. And I think the more we get kind of that data, the more it will be more widely accepted. At least that's my hope,
And
right?
then you'll be able to call yourself the corporate numerologist.
Just, my gosh, can you imagine if I actually like, okay, let's manifest this right now. There will be one
Right.
day when I'll be introduced. I laugh. Most times, it always cracks me up every time. Most times, if I'm meeting like a new vendor or someone else, like I'm meeting someone else in the organization, I most of the time get introduced as, this is Jessica. She's Jessica. Like, I'm like, okay, okay, fine, I'm Jessica. Yeah, I'll help you.
Oh, Jessica, she just
She,
knows
she
things.
just knows. Just Jessica. Great. Okay, fine.
Jessica Cerato, corporate numerologist. There
Let's
we
do
go.
it. Let's do
And
it.
so it is.
And so it is.
Oh my gosh. So tell us a little bit about, you teach numerology and you mentioned that you teach it very intuitively, but you teach two different types of numerology. So let's talk about that for a second, because I know, numerology, you can Google it.
Yes,
You'll
totally.
find some things. But you and I both use both systems of numerology. So can you share a little bit about the difference between those two and how you teach those?
Yeah. So the first one are the actual numbers, and that's kind of what I refer to as Pythagorean numerology, because Pythagoras is the grandfather of that system.
The OG.
And the OG, oh my gosh, I knew that back in high school. But that is where we take the actual numbers. He was actually studying music, which also is what I love. I know you're also an amazing singer, so it doesn't surprise me that you're also really attracted to numerology, because it is all frequency, it is all vibration. And he was hypothesizing that, of course, as notes are held for different amounts of time, the vibration, the frequency changes. And then he proved that each number, just like a sound or a light wave, if you can picture that in your mind, it oscillates at a different rate per second. And then, of course, because we're energetic beings, we interact with them differently. So, using that
Hmm.
system of the individual numbers, I teach the Pythagorean numerology, which is learning all about you, as per the vibrancy and the frequency in you, which is based on the date of your birth. And then, of course, we can look at how your cycles change and move, all
Hmm.
using the numbers. We can look at words, we look at language. There's so many things in that, and that really gives you like a foundation.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we laugh if anyone can Google this, although you're not going to get good information, but the energy grid, the tic-tac-toe, is the foundation really, of this system. And my belief is, although the next system, which I'll talk about, is different, you really truly do benefit from having the foundation of the Pythagorean before you move into the astronumerology.
Very much so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And so really then the astronumerology is combining astrology and numerology, using this deck of cards. This was birthed way back in Atlantis, and it is really bringing the frequency of cycles. So, 52 weeks, in the year, 52 decks of cards in the deck, four seasons, four suits, all of that. And really, the numbers, I feel Pythagorean, really show us who we are, the energy and frequency that is present. And I feel the cards for me, astronumerology, is more about like our job description, not necessarily
Mhm.
job, but like what
Yeah.
we're really meant to do or make the
Yes.
best use of our frequency.
Yeah.
And so imagine if I just keep it really simple, it's like, okay, this system really shows you who you are, whether you like it or not. That's the biggest thing. Whether you accept it or not is your choice, but really
Yeah.
shows you, mathematically, scientifically, energetic who you are. And this other system can tell you the best path, or the path of least resistance through
Yes.
doing things in the world. Like, boom, match made in heaven. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. I love that. I love how you describe it that way as a job description. I've always said, the Pythagorean is your foundation, just like you called
Yeah.
it. And then I say the book of life numerology, astronumerology teaches you or shows you what's possible.
I love
So
that.
nothing but opened up possibility for me of like, I remember being a virtual assistant, hiding behind the scenes, never speaking, never doing anything. I do not do Facebook Lives. And then I saw it in my chart and I went, okay, so now we're going to do a Facebook Live every single weekday for 4 years straight. Because it just opened up that possibility. And now you put
Possibility,
a camera in front of my face and I'm like, hi.
right? When
And I
you
have over 180 podcast episodes as a result, right? So it shows you what's possible in the future.
Yeah, and I think I love that because, I think that how you just said that foundation, it's like it's always easier, although the system doesn't tell you this. Just think about when someone tells you something about yourself. We believe other people much more than we believe ourselves,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So like this system really like holds up the mirror for us to accept it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I love it does give us so much permission to play, I feel, which is always important in my chart. And I think that's how I will say you and I use it very differently. You know,
Mhm.
there are some people who use this system and they will say, this is what's going to happen. This, and really, I'm laughing because it's like we're using a modality to put people in boxes, and that
Yeah,
is
no,
not
thank
what we
you.
want to do,
Thank
right?
you.
And so it's like, no, we both use the system as like, this is possible. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be here if it were not for you. Now it's your choice if you want to play there. Um, but my one of my mottos is why not? Like,
Why not?
why not?
What if?
What if? Why not? And now knowing obviously my chart, and we've talked like so much, I think this is even our passion, like so much about business and about work and what we're doing, but really the system in terms of like family structures, relationships is just so key. I mean, I use it every day to wrangle my 8-year old and my 10-year old. Like it's just part of life now, which feels um yeah, it just feels good.
Yeah, and it's just part of who you are at this point.
Mm.
I know, I love that you say that 'cause I don't have kids, but I live with a ruling number 7, and as a 4, that can be challenging sometimes. So as I'm sitting, I'm like, and he knows it so much because I talk about it so much, right? So Tyler is not a numerologist, but he's learning through osmosis.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a guest on a podcast earlier today, and I just was messaging him, celebrating, like, oh my God, the podcast was so much fun. I had a blast. And I said, she's a ruling number 7. And he went, oh, I know what that means. It was a
I
lot
love
of
it.
fun. It was a very fast-paced podcast.
I can imagine. Yeah, don't you love that, right?
Yeah.
I was laughing, like my oldest, she read the book that I published, which I was like shocked at, but I loved it. Then she came to me and she was like, "This system is amazing. I love it so much." And I was like, "Wow."
Oh,
But no, this way. This is her reason
oh,
why. She was like, "Because this tells me that Taylor Swift has the same birth card as me." And if that's so true in this world, I'm so connected to. I'm like, listen, I'll take that win. I will take that win. Yes, you
oh
are
my
both
gosh.
5 of clubs. You own that. And yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. That is so good. Okay, so the book. I wanted to bring up the book on the
I know
show.
we look at all these things. Like they're so I know.
Yes. So I remember the first copy of the book that I got. I was one of the lucky ones who got
You
to
are.
preview the book before it was published. And in the very beginning of the book, it talks about how this book is meant to be dog-eared and coffee stained.
Yes.
And I can tell you, within less than a week of owning it, that is exactly what happened. Because you go through it and you read it differently the second time. And then you're like, wait, I want to go and find out what this person is. And so you flip through it and yeah, it gets used.
Yes. I love that. Oh, I love that.
So, what I want to know more than anything is what was the inspiration behind the book and what was the journey like in creating
Yeah.
it?
Well, a personal inspiration behind the book really, as I reflected, went back to Wall Street and even in my corporate career, where I was most of the time the only woman in the room, where I
Mm,
had to wade through a lot of male voices and like just interpret it differently. I never forget, this is the reason this still shocks me to this day. When they told me that a minimum heel requirement to be on the trading floor was 2 inches, I was like, "Oh, that's, like, so sexist, like, why are you gonna dress women up in 2-inch heels?" And then
yeah.
until, like, one of my good friends was like, "No, Jess, like, you need to be as tall as the rest of us So when you put your hand up to trade, they need to be able to see your
Ah,
hand. And they're like,
yep.
no nail polish, no rings, no jewelry, or they're going to see that it's a woman's hand and they're not going to give you the trade. Right.
Wow.
So this had been ingrained in me. So right at the start of my career. And even in the study of numerology, you and I, although, thank you to Pythagoras, the grandfather, but many
Mhm.
of the writers or people who have shared about this system have really come from this male perspective, number one, and really, again, come from this perspective of this is how it is. This is the meaning of this, really not taking into account like the intuitive, really, I think, like the intuitive importance of the system. And so it was really
Mhm.
important for me. I wish I had this resource when I was learning. I wish I
No way.
had this textbook, right?
Yeah.
And so I got together with some of the numerologists and we were like, let's write
Let's
it.
do it.
And it
Yeah.
was funny, and it also came, as you can probably know, I inquisitive, and when I get an idea in my head, just like an equation, I don't kind of give up on it. And I
Mhm.
remember in the communities where I learned, I would always ask questions, and a lot of times the answers was, well, like no, like we don't know that, or that wasn't in the system, or like specifically around the Joker, specifically around the zero. Right? These are
Mhm.
two concepts that I really drastically went away from how I learned it.
Yeah.
But now I know in the world, if I share more about the Joker, I share more about the zero. There are other numerologists in the world who also teach from this way.
Yeah.
So, I'm not alone here. But that was another reason too of like, I wanted anyone who asked a question to know that the answer was already inside of them, but to give them tools to help them work it out on their own.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the book has a lot of words and a lot of description, but one of my favorite parts is the intuitive polls, where we give
Mhm.
people resources and templates to take the deck of cards and like do their own polls, ask their own questions and get their own answers.
Yeah.
Because that was actually, I mean, I still use that tool. I pull cards every day.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, like
It's good.
I'm like thinking, I'm like, when have I not pulled a card recently? I always do.
Deck of cards right
Pick
here.
cards. I know. I know. That's funny. Oh my gosh, I'm laughing. The King of Hearts is on the top of yours. We were just talking about Taylor Swift, and the Five of Clubs is on the top of mine. That's really
That's
funny.
fun. Oh my gosh. Well, Jessica, I could talk to you all day about numbers. We could geek out on this all the time. But I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing a little bit of your vision of what numerology is. For me, it's so important that we realize that it's not just something that you just Google. There's so much more depth to it. And I love that you bring the intuitive piece into it, which is why you are the only person that I recommend to people when it comes to learning numerology. I
Mhm.
don't want to teach it. That's
Yeah,
way too boxy for a five of diamonds.
not surprising for the Five of Diamonds.
No, put me in a box. But yes, if anybody out there is curious about learning numerology, wants to learn numerology, Jessica is the go-to resource. So definitely reach out to her. Jessica, thank you for being on the show. Do you have any last words that you'd like to share before we end?
Mhm. I would just like to celebrate everyone who is listening because this is an act of investment in yourself, right? To gather more information, to be curious, because this year, 2025, is what I'm calling the year of unbreakable brilliance. And it's just this time for you to shine. And any way that Cindy or I or other things or people in this world can help you do that, that's the work right now. So celebrating you for listening. Thank you for listening. And if I can support you in any way, please reach out. And, I always say this is what I also love about us here, Cindy, is if we're not the best, like I'll help someone if I'm the best to help them. And if I'm
Mhm.
not the best to help, I will find the best to help, right? So
Exactly.
um I think that's also an just important message for everyone is celebrate your uniqueness, shine in your brilliance, and find a community that loves and honors you just as you are and makes you shine brighter this year. So that's what I would
Mm,
wish for everybody.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thanks, Cindy.